You blame someone today for something that went wrong, for how you felt, for why things aren't moving forward, and the moment you assign that blame, something inside you relaxed, because if it's their fault, it's not yours. If you're not responsible, you don't have to change. Here's what nobody's telling you. Every time you externalize fault, you surrender power. Not because blame is immoral, because it keeps you unconscious. By the way, this isn't about positive thinking. Positive thinking without self-awareness is delusion. What I'm going to show you is how seeing yourself clearly ends the patterns you can't break. The Japanese had a moment for this, not a practice, a recognition. Kensho. By the end, you'll recognize one pattern you've been running unconsciously, and that recognition alone will change how you move tomorrow. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what you're not seeing about yourself, and why that blindness is costing you everything. If this already feels different, you belong here. Consider subscribing and walk this path with the Last Ronin. This morning you reacted to something. Small thing. Someone said something. Something didn't go your way. And you responded automatically, not with thought. With pattern, defensive, withdrawn, irritated, dismissive, whatever your default is. And afterward, you justified it. They shouldn't have said that. Anyone would have reacted that way. Given the circumstances, I was right to respond like that. Notice how automatic that justification was? You've been defending your reactions for so long you think observation is judgment. But it's not. Observation is just seeing what's actually happening. Right now you're carrying a story about why you are the way you are, your past, your personality, your circumstances, and that story explains everything. Why you avoid certain things, why you react certain ways, why you haven't changed certain patterns. The story's comfortable, it gives you reasons, but it also keeps you trapped. Because as long as the story explains your behavior, you don't have to examine it. You had a moment this week where you could have acted differently. You saw the opportunity clearly, and then something pulled you back into the familiar pattern. Not consciously, automatically. And afterward, you explained why. I wasn't ready. The timing wasn't right. I needed to think about it more. You're doing it right now. Explaining instead of observing. This is the mechanism that keeps you unconscious. You're not seeing yourself, you're maintaining a narrative about yourself. And that narrative has become more important than reality. So when reality contradicts the narrative, you don't update the narrative, you explain away reality. I'm someone who values authenticity while performing constantly. I'm committed to growth while avoiding discomfort. I'm self-aware while repeating the same patterns for years. The gap between who you say you are and what you actually do isn't hypocrisy. It's unconsciousness. You genuinely don't see it, because seeing it would destabilize the identity you've built. This is where you get stuck. The Last Ronin had a moment where everything he believed about himself collapsed. Not through failure, through recognition. He saw clearly, unavoidably, that he'd been fighting shadows. Not external enemies, internal patterns he couldn't see because he was identified with them. He thought his anger was righteous, it was protection. He thought his isolation was strength, it was avoidance. He thought his discipline was mastery, it was control over fear. None of this was learned through philosophy, it was seen directly. That's Kensho, the instant you see your true nature, not the story you tell about yourself, not the image you project, the actual patterns running underneath everything. This is where most men misunderstand awakening. They think it's about becoming better. It's about seeing clearly, and seeing clearly often reveals you're not who you thought you were. The Ronin didn't transcend his patterns through effort, and he recognized them, and recognition dissolved their automatic control. Right now you're identified with patterns you think are you, your anxiety, your doubt, your need for approval, your defense mechanisms. You think, this is who I am, but it's not. It's what you've been unconsciously running. And until you see it as a pattern, not as your identity, you can't choose differently. The moment the Ronin saw his anger as a pattern, not as himself, it lost its grip. Not because he suppressed it, because he was no longer identified with it. That's the shift. From I am angry to anger is present. From I am anxious to anxiety is arising. From I need approval to there's a pattern seeking approval. If this is already naming something you feel, stay with me. Because in 2 minutes, I'm going to show you how to see the pattern you've been running blind. You've tried to change behavior without seeing what's driving it, and behavior without awareness just shifts form. Your ego needs you to stay unconscious, not because it's evil, because it's fragile. The ego is the story you tell about who you are, and that story requires constant maintenance. Watch what happens when something threatens it. Someone criticizes you accurately. Your ego. They don't understand, they're wrong, they're jealous. Immediate defense, automatic rejection. Not because they're wrong, because accepting their criticism would require updating your self-concept, and your ego protects the current self-concept above everything. You didn't choose that reaction, it ran automatically. Someone succeeds where you've failed. Your ego. They had advantages, they got lucky, their path was easier. Immediate rationalization, not to understand reality, to protect your narrative. You did this today. Maybe multiple times. Your ego doesn't want clarity, it wants consistency, even if that consistency keeps you stuck. So it generates explanations that preserve your self-image while allowing your patterns to continue. I'm just introverted instead of seeing the avoidance pattern. I'm a perfectionist instead of seeing the fear of judgment. I'm independent instead of seeing the inability to trust. Each label feels like self-awareness, but it's actually concealment, because once you label the pattern as part of your identity, you stop examining it. It becomes who you are, and who you are doesn't need to change. This is why you can understand yourself intellectually and remain completely unchanged. You've replaced self-observation with self-narration. You're not seeing what you do. You're telling a story about why you do it. And as long as the story is good enough, the pattern continues. Stay with me. This changes how tomorrow works. Here is what the Ronin understood that you don't. You are not your patterns. You are the awareness that can observe them. That distinction is everything. As long as you think I am anxious, you can't examine the anxiety, because you are inside it. But the moment you recognize anxiety is present, you've created space. And in that space, choice becomes possible. That is Kensho, not transcendence. Separation through awareness. Here is the law: observe without identifying, not once. Constantly. Notice what you are doing without immediately justifying it. Watch the pattern. Don't become it. This is the shift that ends unconscious behavior. You can't do this yet because you are identified with everything you feel, every emotion, every thought, every impulse. It all feels like you. So you defend it, justify it, explain it. The Ronin trained differently. Anger arises, he observes it. Doesn't act from it. Fear appears, he sees it, doesn't collapse into it. Impulse emerges, he notes it, doesn't obey it. Not suppression, separation. Until observation became automatic. Until he could see patterns without being controlled by them. Here's how you start tomorrow. Not eventually. Tomorrow. Catch yourself in one automatic reaction. Doesn't matter what it is. Defensiveness, avoidance, seeking approval, irritation. And instead of justifying it, just observe it. There is defensiveness arising. Not, I am defensive because they attacked me. Just, defensiveness is present. Hold that observation for 10 seconds. Don't explain, don't justify, don't act. Just see it. That is one moment of Kensho practice, and in that 10 seconds, something shifts. The pattern loses a fraction of its automatic control, because you are no longer fully identified with it. Defensiveness. Someone criticizes you, old pattern, immediate defense. That's not true, you don't understand. New pattern, pause, observe. There's defensiveness arising, then ask, is there truth here? The defensiveness may still be present, but you're not acting from it. Approval seeking. You're about to say something to impress someone. Old pattern, say it automatically, perform. New pattern, notice the impulse. There's a pattern seeking approval. Then decide consciously whether to speak. You're no longer the impulse. You're watching it. Avoidance, hard task. You're about to distract yourself. Old pattern, automatic switch to easier thing. Justify it later. New pattern, catch the avoidance. There's resistance to this task. Observe it for 5 seconds, then choose. Observation doesn't eliminate the resistance, but it removes its automatic control. Blame, something goes wrong. First thought, whose fault is this? Old pattern, assign blame, feel relief, stay unchanged. New pattern, notice the blame impulse. There's a pattern deflecting responsibility. Hold that recognition, Then examine your actual role. The pattern can be present without dictating your response. Reactivity. Someone triggers you. Old pattern. React immediately from the trigger. New pattern. Feel the reaction forming. Name it. There's anger building. Observe it like weather, then respond consciously. You feel everything, but you're not controlled by it. Here's what changes when you separate from your patterns. You stop defending behaviors you don't even want. You stop justifying reactions that harm you. You stop identifying with states that pass. Old you was your emotions. New you observes emotions arising and passing. Old you was your anxiety. New you notices anxiety present without becoming it. This isn't detachment from life. This is Kensho, seeing your true nature. And your true nature isn't the anxiety, the anger, the fear, the need. It's the awareness that can observe all of it. Almost no one lives from this space. A mirror doesn't become what it reflects. It remains clear regardless of what passes before it. People sense the shift before they understand it. You don't react the same way. Don't defend automatically. Don't collapse into every emotion. You're just present with what's happening without being consumed by it. Something triggers you and you pause before responding. Someone attacks and you observe the reaction forming without immediately acting from it. They'll ask, "How do you stay so calm?" You won't have a dramatic answer. You just stopped identifying with every pattern that arises. That's it. Observe, separate, choose, repeat, until awareness became your default instead of automatic reaction, until you could see yourself clearly enough to no longer be controlled by what you see. That's Kensho. And once you have it, self-deception ends, because you can no longer pretend you don't see what you're actually doing. The Last Ronin doesn't fight his patterns. He sees them clearly, and seeing them clearly removes their automatic control, not because the patterns disappear, because he is no longer identified with them. You've seen now what most men refuse to see, that you are not your reactions. You are the awareness observing them. If you see the pattern now, subscribe and continue training. The self-aware version of you isn't waiting to be built. It was always here. Now you see it.